The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today who's been on the show before and is a good friend of ours. But before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the newly rebranded LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more, including information about the NAILD LSC certification. Also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do this without your support, MaxLight and their CMax Lighting Controls platform. Check them out, maxlite.com/CMAX. It's a really interesting platform, and if you're unfamiliar with it, you should definitely check it out. It's a versatile, simple solution for lighting controls, especially if you're going to be using MaxLight's integrated lighting controls enabled fixtures, because they have this patented USB-C port that allows them to just quickly swap out the lighting controls if you don't want sensors in every single fixture, but you still want that networked triple LC functionality. It's a great solution for that, and they can go from the most basic to the most intricate networked lighting control solutions and anything in between. So I highly recommend you check it out if you're unfamiliar with it, maxlite.com/CMAX. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have Nathan. Nathan, do you mind? You've been on the show before. So for those who have not seen the episodes that you've been on before, do you mind just giving a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Nathan Williams. Thanks for having me back, guys. I'm so happy to be back. I
Yeah, thanks for
am
coming.
now the owner and founder of Williams Lighting Control Services. I was with a former rep firm here in Houston. They're a great outfit, CW Lighting. They love their customers. They take great care of their customers. For me, I was ready to do my own thing, spread my wings and fly, and take care of customers in another way that I felt more comfortable doing. So we parted ways on good terms, and now I'm out on my own to design and service, program, and just be there for any person that is interested in how they can better take care of their lighting control system or better establish and continue on the growth of their lighting control system nationwide. So that's what I'm all about. I'm all about controls like you guys. So let's get into it.
No, definitely. I appreciate you coming back on, and congrats
Yeah.
on the new business venture from one business owner
Yes.
to another. It is a
Yeah.
challenge, but there's so much demand right now for assistance in lighting control. So you definitely are stepping into a good role. So, but yeah, I mean, basically, you've seen a lot when it comes to the good, the bad, and the ugly with lighting controls installation. And so, from your perspective, where are we with lighting controls? Have we started to address some of the issues that have cropped up over the years?
I think we are moving into a better place. At the same time, lighting controls is becoming more complicated. That
Mm.
I think we're gonna plateau, and then we're gonna settle for a little bit. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is we're going to with the new template that um, that you guys have come up with. I
Oh,
think
yeah, the Design
I
Express template
the
from
Design
LCA.
Express template from LCA. I think what is going to happen is once designers get their hands on this, that is where we're going to see some great increase in performance of systems. You're going to find systems are going to start performing the way that they are intended to finally. You're not
Mm.
going to have people like me that are scratching my head going, what do they really want this to do?
Mm.
Because for
Hmm.
years, you have technicians trying to figure out, well, what do they really want it to do? I
Right.
can't tell you the any time other than a government project that a foot candle reading has actually been set as a set point in a design guide, except for a government project because they require it.
Sure.
Other than that, it's okay. Daylighting zone. Okay, daylighting zone to what set point level?
Right.
It has never been really done on except for a handful of occasions, and that is in the school district design guidelines, and even that information rarely gets published in the
Right.
actual specification or on the contract documents. And if it's not on the contract document, don't expect a technician like me to ever get that information. Because if I don't see it in the contract document, don't expect the spec book to ever make it to me in the field, because technicians are working off contract documents, the manufacturers are working off contract documents. And if a manufacturer on their submittal says no sequence of operation provided, then I don't know what to program off of.
Right.
Now, you better believe I'm going to sit there and go, that's not a true statement. I don't agree with that. I'm pretty sure there is a sequence of operations somewhere. Where are those detail sheets? Where are
Right.
those detail sheets? Where's the specification? I'm going to go digging, because you and I both know that's a farce. That is a far cry
Right.
from the truth. There was a design intent somewhere, and an application engineer somewhere needs to be drug out back and shown how to read drawings. So I'm just going to leave it like that. No name pointing, but just someone needs to be drug out back and shown how to read drawings. They need to
So
be taken back to elementary school of drawings. But
just for, I know a lot of lighting designers push back on this and say, well, I don't want to be put on the line saying the wrong foot candle measurements. But from a technician's standpoint, why is it so important that a sequence of operations have a foot candle set point outlined?
oh yeah, well, and I get their risk too, because let's face it, I'm gonna make a statement here that anyone can challenge me on this. Foot candle set point is more of an art than a science.
Mm-hmm.
And I make this statement after having a conversation with a designer, and I'm going to answer your question based off doing daylight harvesting with a lighting designer. And a lighting designer basically took me around the space, and IEC basically gives us great guidelines, or IES gives us great guidelines for foot candle levels. So any engineer, any lighting designer can look to IES and say, I'm going to follow these guidelines. And if they say 30 to 50 foot candles, well, you know what? Lean on the heavier side and give them more light. Unless you're in a nightclub,
Right.
then give them less light, unless it's in the bathrooms. But if it's an office, 50-foot candles. Just state 50-foot candles in the open office areas and the private office areas and the conference. Just 50-foot candles. 50-foot candles everywhere. 30-foot candles in the corridors. Just be done with it. Just state it. You're safe to say that. But I'm going to tell you this. In an open office area, 50-foot candles is going to make the lights turn off. Now, that's what we want to see. That is what IECC 2024 says. It is dimming to off. Guess what? This is what the energy code and the people that are writing it have failed to think about. Education. Education of the end user is going to turn around and say, hey, that light turned off. I don't like that. That is disrupting. That is disrupting to the neurotypicals, the neurodivergents, the everybody's. That is just disrupting. What is not disrupting is what I learned from a lighting designer that has the well building practice in mind of keeping everything even across the space. that color temperature, that warm color temperature that is put out by these 4,000 fixtures compared to the 6,000, 8,000 Kelvin sunlight, our
Hmm.
eyes want to see and work under that 4,000. So you have to leave that daylight zone glowing at least 20, 25% to really give some of that warmth back to that daylighting zone, to warm it up, to make people feel happy and encouraged by that.
Hmm.
So you may have a daylighting zone at 170. So you have that even transition across the space. And he said what you have to do is you have to step back and you have to look at the space and you have to look at the color across the desk. And you're looking for that warm white coming back from the fixture, and you're making sure to look that it is basically being washed out to this medium white from the daylight. And as long as everything looks medium when you're looking across and you're holding your hand above your eyes like this to block out the actual fixtures, if you can't tell, then you've set it correctly. But if you can tell that a light is off, your daylighting is wrong. It is dead wrong.
Hmm.
If you set it to 50-foot candles, you've done it dead wrong. The lights are going to turn off. And that's not what you want. And there's tricks that I do. It may be against code, but I will set it to where I will set a low end trim to where the light will not turn off because I don't
Hmm.
want the maintenance calls. I do not want to deal with an irate customer on an
Yeah.
executive floor saying all these things.
Yep.
I have
Yep.
to think about the customer because we're talking about LEDs. We're not talking about fluorescents that
Hmm.
were giving the energy impact savings that that daylighting was made for.
Right.
Daylighting doesn't impact this kind of savings on LEDs, not in the same way that
Right.
it
Right.
did with fluorescence. It's a savings, yes, because the drivers don't get as warm. They don't. There's all those the minutia behind everything that is going on with the dimming that causes the
Hmm.
driver to be a little cooler. And yeah, we can go into that all day long and say that yes, there is a savings there. But at the end of the day, it's not the same impact that fluorescent dimming
Right.
does. Now,
Right.
dimming a fluorescent damages the ballast,
Mm-hmm.
but still, the energy savings far exceeds.
Hmm.
So the point is, me leaving that light on versus turning it off, nothing.
Yeah.
It beats the amount of money that a customer is going to have to pay me to come out on a service call going, why is this light
Yes.
turning off and why can't I turn it
Yes.
back on? And
Yep.
the headaches and the
Yep.
hassles. It's that well building space that the movement is moving towards to make people
Mm.
feel more comfortable and happy and more in touch with nature and
Yep.
that's what matters. So defining foot candle levels, while it is important, it is more important as a society that we come more in line with well building, that we
Mm.
become more knowledgeable about that commissioning standards meet the well building, that technicians become more in touch with well building certifications and understanding
Mhm.
of that designers understand more about that,
Mhm.
and that energy codes adopt a better and more um, obtainable solution than just
Mm.
let's just turn the lights off and let's just
Yep.
piss everybody off attitude towards
Yep.
things. Let's just make
Yep.
sure that the lights are dimming and not worry so much about are they dimming to off? Are they dimming down? Let's
Mm.
Yep.
forget about the whole off standpoint. Let's not define off as is it continuous dimming to a level that is comfortable to the
Mhm.
occupant. That should be the new language of the code
Right.
with well in mind. That, in my opinion, is what it should be. And so with the new template in mind, using some of that and the template to help define what commissioning should look like. A commissioning agent should be able to now go through with what you guys have created, Webster, to actually see what a technician has set a building up for
Right.
and actually check out correctly.
Mm.
There's so many things that I know that they trimmed it down, but I feel
Yeah.
like there should be like supplemental links about like, hey, this is how we recommend testing this. Like
Mm. Hmm.
Leviton has some ways for how they recommend testing daylight sensors that I've never necessarily heard before, like
Mm.
using a
Hmm.
ladder technique where they step the flashlight up the rungs of a ladder over a period of time to move it towards. So there's
Mm.
different things like you could have supplementary links on the commissioning checklist that could recommend ways of testing. If they require that they have to do the whole 20-minute timeout, then
Hmm.
recommend on there that they check multiple rooms and have a label for them to print out that says occupancy testing in progress, so they can go ahead and print
Hmm.
out as many as they want of sheets to put on doors to go ahead and close off doors. So I think adding that to the template would be beneficial. It wouldn't take
Sure.
up any more space other than reference links of here's some things you can use that we recommend you use.
Yeah.
And it would help the commissioning agent be able to go about their duties at an expedient time.
Mm.
But I think I think you guys have really opened up the door from where we currently are. If you were to
Mm.
mark
Hmm.
today as status quo of they're
Hmm.
not really sure what they're doing, to where we're going to be in 6 months to a year to 18 months, I think I'm really excited for the first job that I get to see where somebody has actually used this and I'm going to recognize it in the drawings and go, ooh, yay, I've got a design template. Yay! Somebody knows how to use this thing. It's not hard. Just fill in the boxes. They're already filled out for you.
I
So
hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
so I'm
But you,
excited. I'm excited.
you bring up a good point though, that daylighting truly is an art, right? And this is where
Yes,
unfortunately the code does should be revisited,
it
right?
should.
You bring
It
up
should.
all of the points that we all know is that you you mentioned educating. We have a hard enough time educating the electricians and designers and
Yes,
the other principals of our own group and industry that manage and design these systems. There is zero chance, zero, that we get to end users to a point where they understand why that light turned off over their head. It's just
correct.
simply never going to happen. And that is where you make the best point of why the code should sort of be revisited so that
Mm.
we don't have to turn the light off. We dim to a minimum level and we shoot for well building comfort. And I completely agree with you. You mentioned something early on, the most important question that we all ask currently when we get on site, which is, what do you want the system to do? And so I'm curious from sort of both standpoints of you're going into a new job to start up and you're going into someone else's project to now redo a startup, right? How does that question differ from the original initial installation versus you're going back 6 months or 12 months later onto someone else's project because the owner's not happy because they probably didn't have the information in the first place?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an example of a project in a school district where the sequence of operation, while brilliant, um, it was just overly complicated for what the owner wanted. The engineer did a great job thinking through a sequence of operation for how when the alarm is armed, it sends a command to turn off the corridors and it does all these things. And then if the security system is breached and an intrusion alarm is fired, it'll turn on all the lights. If the fire alarm is triggered, it'll turns on all the lights in the school so they have safe egress out.
Mm-hmm.
And then occupancy sensors will only control half the lighting when the system is set for after hours. So it'll cut off half the lights. Occupancy sensors will control the other half. And then when the system is put into shutdown, basically armed, then the rest of the lights get cut off. When that stepped backwards, the system is set to normal hours, half the lights cut on. When it's set to student hours, the rest of the lighting controlled by sensors become on only. So it's basically we give you half control of the lights by the sensors, and we cut on half the lights for moving around. So it's a great. He had a great narrative, a great sequence of operation. It was very clear, but the people in energy management didn't know what they were getting. And that's part of the problem with a lot of schools is construction is involved, but not necessarily the users of the system, which is like energy management and the electrical side of things. You have construction and they're just shaking their heads because they're like, yeah, I've got this whole school that I've got to build, and I've got to understand air and the building envelope and everything else. And you think I actually understand what you're telling me? No. So, so he had this brilliant solution to automate everything, but what kept happening is we never had fire alarm landed. We never had security landed. So the lights were burning all night, and I had all the logic there, but they were like, why are the lights burning all the time? So they had us put in a schedule. Okay, well, they had us put in a schedule. Okay, the alarm was disarmed. Why aren't the lights turning on? Because you haven't landed the security yet. When are you going to land the security wires? And so they just kept getting fed up with the fact that, well, you haven't had your third party complete the integration yet. Like the key part of the integration is not complete. So what turned around is all that got deleted and it got set to hard schedules because there were misunderstandings of how things were. The only thing that got left was fire alarm. When the fire alarm goes off, the lights go to full. And that's it. So all the nice things that were in there in this system designed for safety and managing when lights turn on and turn off and working with the occupancy sensors based off BAS got eliminated just because other contractors wouldn't finish their work, and the school district was expecting 12 schools to be online functioning a specific way. But we kept calling out, hey, this isn't done. The integrators haven't done their stuff yet. It's not going to work the way you want it to until this is done.
And so what do you think the big breakdown what ultimately led to those circumstances happening? Do you have a guess as to why these steps weren't taken?
Failure to read emails. I can tell you, I personally put labels on the cables that were pulled to my equipment and for those contractors and labeled them, this is for fire, this is for security. Like I made pigtails and I put Wagos on them, and I was expecting a connection to be made. And I took pictures, documented, and I sent out emails to the general contractor and said, this is what needs to happen. And I CC'd the district. And it's like, until this happens, the expected outcome of X, Y, and Z will not happen until A, B, and C and everything else in between occurs.
Well, and it's such a bummer because, lighting controls get the short end of the stick in that situation.
Yes.
Technically all the systems are functional except for the lighting controls, but it's not the lighting controls fault that that
Yeah.
integration was never completed. I mean, you did everything you could, but you can't go up to the fire alarm system and terminate onto it. That's not allowed.
No.
You can't, program in a way in which you don't need that termination. So ultimately, there was some degradation in communication that happened, and as a result, this was poorly coordinated. But it unfortunately, again, it fell to the lighting control system to be blamed for it, despite the fact that it was perfectly ready to receive that. So, what do you think we can do in this industry to improve that?
I think it comes down to there should have been a clear commissioning checklist for those
Mm,
projects, and a
mm,
commissioning agent should have verified those pieces and told the school district, y'all need to back off and wait because I
yeah.
haven't done my X, Y, and Z until I've done my X, Y, and Z. Hold off. Y'all don't get to
Hmm.
complain about any system functionality until I have X, Y, and Z'd it. And
Well, and I
I
think
haven't
that
done that yet.
the great championing for what Lynn Gomes talks about a lot with commissioning
Yep.
providers. I mean, having that professional follow through, from beginning to end on a project really does ensure critical systems are compliant with the design, and that the appropriate parties are responsible for their roles within those kind of handshakes between systems. So I think that you're right. I think, we need to have better oversight on these
Mm.
projects in a way that, the stakeholders can actually hear what is going on, as opposed to, it's possible somebody had the ear of the stakeholders and just kept blaming the control system. And as a
Yep.
result,
Yep.
it got the shaft. But, um, you know, so I think you're right. I think that that is one piece of the equation that we really need to do a better job of. At the same time, there's a huge amount of pushback on that, saying, "Oh, it's so expensive, though." And
Yep.
so,
Yeah.
you know, but what a lot of people say is, "Well, yeah, it's expensive, but what you're saving as a result of paying for this service is actually going to save you a lot more money than you would have to spend trying to resolve these issues."
Yeah. Well, and it's the service is non-negotiable if you're trying to meet ICC
Hmm.
2021, 2020,
Hmm.
24,
Yeah.
2015. And I mean, with where I'm at, I mean, that's a requirement. So it's like
Hmm.
I'm shocked when I go on these projects and it's like, so when's your commissioning? What do you mean? That required thing that checkbox at the very end that you're
Yep.
required to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, that thing that you're supposed to do. Yeah, when's that happening? Oh, we're not doing it. Okay,
Right.
might as well not do any of it then, because
Yep.
Right.
that's the thing that matters. That's the thing that says you did it all. So
All right,
yeah.
I've got a question for you. So this has happened to me a couple of times, and only once was there a commissioning agent to back my play. Um, have you ever run into a situation where you were given a foot candle level for a project, and you were not able to achieve that level with the lighting design provided? And then how
Oh,
did you handle that?
I think recently I ran into it, and it was more so. It wasn't me in particular where I had to match it. It was more so the electrical contractor ran into it. It was at the elevators, and it was fire marshal. Um, they ended up having to take the normal circuit and making it part of the emergency in this case because it called for dimming. Because when they went back and they checked for for foot candles at the threshold, they were at night. It was just too low, so they had to make the normal circuit also part of the egress. But that also means for me, with what we were planning on doing, is we were expecting to be dimming the corridors and the elevator lobbies at night.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be dimming those elevator lobbies at night because I'll take it below the code levels. So I won't be able to do that at this ambulatory care center that I'm working on in Miami. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can do for that, just from the standpoint of maintaining code for egress and the requirement at the threshold, which I think is like 11 foot candles or something like that at the threshold. I don't remember what it is,
Yeah.
but it's got to be high enough to where you can see to cross the threshold. And at night with no sun, the fixtures there themselves, by the time you get to the threshold, there's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they'd have to add more
Well,
fixtures if they wanted to actually have control.
and I mean,
There's
we've
no-
heard a lot of interesting reports about how this sort of criteria is vetted because it seems like every AHJ has a different way of checking. Some will just walk through and say, "Can I see the floor?" Great. Okay, it passes. And there are other groups that will break out the light meter and really, you know, test it out and make sure that it meets that criteria. What are you seeing a lot?
Um, so in a performance venue, as an example, performance venues actually have some really interesting foot candle levels for like movie theaters and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I've seen them break out the light meter, and it's like got to maintain like a foot candle in the performance space. So that means like you have to have your house lights on technically
Mm-hmm.
to meet
Right.
spec. Like you can't just go dark. And I'm like, but this is a performance venue. Like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like, it's like, but no, you got to have your house lights on. I'm like, oh, okay, well, so like we have the house lights on at like 10%, and
Oof.
it's like the customer's like, but I during a concert, and I'm like, according to the fire marshal, yeah,
Yeah. Ouch.
yeah, you do.
Uh,
And it's like you got
well,
to have one foot candle.
Yep.
and I mean, I guess
Like I don't know what to tell you.
that's a really good point when we're talking about house lighting in entertainment venues. A lot of people say, well, it can be 0 to 10 volts, it's fine, and it's like, no, it can't. You really should be dimming to off with DMX, which is the
Yeah,
shared protocol of the space,
Yep.
because that way you guarantee integration with both systems, but also you have that ability to dial into that level that you need, which could very
yeah,
well be like 0.5% to get 1 foot candle as
yeah,
opposed to the floor of 10% on a 0 to 10
Mm-hmm.
volt line. So um, yeah, I mean, that's something that a lot of people might not consider when they're specing these spaces.
yeah. Exactly,
And and
exactly.
so, so these spaces, these specialty spaces, you see a lot of that. But what about like a standard office building or a school or something? What do you see?
Yeah, they basically go through, they cut the lights off, and they're like, yeah, as long as there's not any dead spots. Not a lot of times do I see them walking through with a light meter. Sometimes they do.
Mhm,
They've been around the block long enough that the fire marshals are just like, yeah, that's a clear path, and they can see through,
mhm,
and they can find their exit that way. Other times they want to verify that, yeah, what does the light meter say?
mhm,
Right.
So in Houston, we've got a good mix of professionals that are using professional tools to do the job,
mhm,
and depending on the space and what it calls for, they'll break out what's required to accurately check. and do the job appropriately.
So most people, unless you've done lighting startups, don't understand the pain that is motion sensor testing. So when
Oh
you've got to
gosh.
do motion sensor testing in a building, anyone who's done it understands that it can be very difficult to do during work hours, right? No matter how hard you try to block off a hallway or block off a room, someone walks in, someone does this, someone does that. So typically in the past, I would try and do, I would shorten the timeout to its minimum level for just testing purposes, and then go back later in the evening, reset everything, and do the actual testing. But I'm curious how you have handled that, and how you work with, going through and doing these motion
Yeah.
sensor testing, especially when you've got 20, 30-minute timeouts on things.
Yeah. So my primary manufacturer, I'm going to give them a shout out, Watt Stopper. They have the ability with their handheld remote on the DLM side to, if they've got a bunch of sensors on their in-room bus, you can either tell all sensors to go into test mode, or you can select just one sensor to go into test mode, and that one sensor, if it times out, will control all the lights regardless of anything else. So what's great is I can keep people away from me and check one sensor at a time and say, this sensor, I want it to go into test mode. And test mode says, regardless of the time delay, say 20 minutes, I'm going to go to 6 seconds. So 6 seconds, it's going to turn the lights off, regardless of what movement is triggering the other sensors on this IRB. And so that's great. So I can isolate little areas and keep people away from me and test these little areas. And I can quickly test sensors regardless of how occupied it is. The other thing I'll do is, knowing the way the manufacturer's systems pretty much work, is most of the time these systems, they come up and they pre-program themselves one way or another to where they're binding their loads to all the loads. So they're going to control all the loads. So all you're really looking for is, are the sensors picking up a false trigger? There's ways of doing this without having to actually see the lights turn off. So it's a matter of being still long enough to watch the LEDs on a sensor. So you're looking for false triggering from airflow, from heat, from airflow. So it's watching the LEDs on sensors around you and just knowing, hey, if I can stand still for 20, 30 seconds and see if this sensor can roughly time out for 30 seconds, then chances are I'm not getting airflow. And if I know the air is on, then I'm not going to get a false trigger at this time. Luckily, hopefully not. And then I go from there. And I've got a good chance that 99% of the time, that's a safe bet that I'm covering myself by doing little spot checks like that, by just checking to see, do I have a green flashing LED or a blue flashing LED for ultrasonic? Do I have a red flashing LED for passive infrared? Can I stand perfectly still, not false trigger it, and nobody's moving around me? Then I'm not necessarily looking to get the lights to completely turn off. I'm looking to see, is the room coming to a status quo as far as airflow, the ceiling grid's not shaking, things like that. Everything else about that sensor should be good to where it can remain stagnant and still for 20 minutes or whatever the time delay is, as long as the contractor says, yeah, we haven't touched those, they're at their defaults, blah, 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 then yeah, that sensor should work. And I'm just going to rely, for the most part, in some degree, that if there's punch list stuff later on down the road, there's going to be a punch list that maybe there's a bad sensor out there somewhere that's going to make a list because it never turns off. And that's going to be a warranty issue. Because let's face it, manufacturers, for the most part, train technicians to cover about 10% of coverage on sensors. They don't tell us to check every single sensor because one, we don't have time, and two, as you said,
Yeah.
on a construction site or in a occupied space, when I get paid for 8 hours to be on site by manufacturers. So my time is there when the electrician is there because I need the
Mm-hmm.
electrician to fix issues that I find, not to go back when I'm not being paid to
Right.
troubleshoot and
Well,
check all the occupancy sensors.
and that's the role of the commissioning
So
provider too. So you
exactly,
shouldn't be
that is
double
the
dipping
role of the
that role.
commissioning advisor. Exactly.
Yep.
So mine is to verify system functionality has been programmed the way it's supposed to. So I'm going to check
Yep.
about 10%, make sure that 10% is functioning the way that I expect it to. If I've programmed anything special and out of the ordinary, then
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to check that kind of stuff. But other than that, I'm going to rely on the commissioning agent who is there to and paid to check roughly 30% or more according to
Yep.
their contract based off what they find and tell me if there's discrepancies that I need to look at. At that point, that means that I was lied to and somebody's been flipping dip switches that they shouldn't have been flipping and turning dials that they shouldn't have been turning. Because for the
Right.
most part, it's not my job, depending on the manufacturer that I'm working under, to mess with the analog devices.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I only mess with the digital devices on most
Sure.
projects.
Well,
So
we're almost out of time here, so I just want to package this up. It's really interesting. It's always fun to get like the perspective from the boots on the ground who are
Mm.
doing the final installation process of a lighting control system. Being that, personally, I spend a lot more time on the theoretical design side, um, and I'll still every now and then do site work, but for the most part, you're day in, day out doing that, which is really, so essential for this. We can't have what might be referred to as commissionless lighting controls. We can certainly get close, and there are systems out there that purport to be commissionless,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know personally if that's accurate, but in reality we still need somebody in the space for most systems to be able to go through the documentation and follow that and program the system per that. So having clear specifications, clear documentation, really
Mm-hmm.
does help you out as a technician to be able to do your job, and that includes foot candle set points. And maybe the foot candle set points are a starting place and that gets reprogrammed later on during site work, but for the most part you need something to latch on to, otherwise you're just guessing. Yeah, it's an open office. What is IES's recommendation? Well, maybe the lights don't meet that recommendation even at full output, so what do you do
Yep.
then? And so having much more clear and accurate documentation will help at least clarify that if you're not meeting that threshold, okay, specifiers, you need to revise your documentation, or we need to provide
Mm.
additional lighting. Like something needs to be done to address this
yep,
intent that we're not able to meet anymore. But it also helps out commissioning providers if they're involved in the project, because then they can go through and vet and ring out the whole system, see if it meets those specs further once you're done with your job. Um, but it really does kind of go back to that designer needing to provide clear guidance and clear intent of their system.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people on the design side would say, well, but I don't get any information from the owner. And it's like, okay, sure. At the same time, that lack of information does not help down the chain. So,
Right. Right.
as
right.
the lighting designer, at least give something, start with something, and
Well,
then
it's
revise as needed.
it's like to your point. It's they designed a lighting system that produces so many foot candles in a space. If
Hmm.
you don't
Mm-hmm.
know a foot candle level, then tell me what your design foot candle level was for the space, and
Sure.
that's
Right.
my set point.
Yeah.
Because that's basically
Yep.
what I'll do is I'll close the blinds and I'll see what the design foot candle level is for the space, and that's my foot candle level.
Sure.
It's not going to get
Yeah.
any brighter than that.
Right.
Nope.
So
Well,
there you go.
and odds are that space probably was run through a photometric calculator at some point, and so you do have
Exactly.
some number that you can
Something.
latch onto, so you can put that in your
Exactly.
documentation. But additionally, I mean, when it comes to verification, we are still very far away from where we should be when it comes
Yep.
to verifying compliance, because even the inspectors or the fire marshals aren't going to be going to every single space double checking everything for
Yeah.
you. A lot of them actually just point to the engineer and say, well, it's their job to make sure that it's correct. So I'm not really going to do their work for them, and as a result there is sort of this finger pointing that goes on, but at the same time you might get caught in the middle, because if the
Mm.
finger pointing just keeps going back and forth, it's like, well guys, like we need to come to something, like something needs to be done to address the problem. um and so again, that's where we come back to documentation and clear communication. But additionally, I mean, a lot of this site work is, documented through emails. And so that can be quite challenging in its own way, being that emails tend to not be a formal documentation process. So maybe there's another thing that we need to address in this industry when it comes to these sorts of site work responsibilities, and who can verify, which system is actually the system that's the problem. Because otherwise, the
Yeah.
lighting control system will oftentimes become the
Mm.
scapegoat
The
for
culprit.
everything
Yep.
else. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we really should do a better job of clarifying. Not just you guys, the technicians, but everybody should be able to say it's not the lighting controls. They're not to blame for this. And that also does fall back to what you started with education. We need to do a better job of educating the end users into what they should expect from their lighting control systems and the integration with those lighting control systems.
Agreed.
Nathan, as always, man, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. Absolutely appreciate your time. It will be exciting to see what happens over the next probably 18 to 24 months, right? By the time
Yes.
this sort of new template for sequence of operations goes through and we actually see it in projects, right, as things go through design. But it'll be great to see what kind of feedback the team gets on it, and how the LCA handles that and deals with it, and then how it gets implemented in the field. And it is exciting to see that maybe we are heading down a path finally where things will get better, because unfortunately, as we all know, it tends to be the technician and the lighting control system that get the short end of the stick. And oftentimes it's not either of their faults. It's a lack of documentation and information. So hopefully this helps a lot. This will help with end users. This will help with everybody down the road, as we get through it. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on as always.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure as always. Look forward to the next time.
Awesome. I will close us out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the newly rebranded LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do this without your support, Max Light and their CMAX Lighting Controls platform. If you want simple programming, you want to have the easiest time on site, I highly recommend you check out Max Light's system, because of the fact that they have designed it from the most basic to the most complex network systems or standalone systems to be user friendly and technician friendly. They want this to be an easy solution for your lighting controls. So I highly recommend you check it out, maxlite.com/CMAX. But until then, thank you for joining me. And Nathan, thank you for joining us as well. This was a great conversation.